Hello and welcome to ET Interview. The year 2021 has been a year of good, solid, all-round resilience. It was a good year of growth, solid resilience in terms of the pandemic comeback, and a good year of demand recovery and solid in terms of capex revival. So how will 2022 be different from 2021? More importantly, how can India Inc. really build on the advantage which currently we have, which is a lot of global liquidity, low interest rates, and a renewed focus towards manufacturing. Now, to discuss all that and much more, it gives me great pleasure to bring on board Mr. TV Narendran, President CII, and also CEO and Managing Director with Tata Steel. Mr. Narendran, fantastic to have you back on ET now. Thank you for joining us. At the outset, wish you and your family, your employees, and everyone at CII a very happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, Nikunj, and to all the viewers. And I hope we have a better 22, even better 22 than we had in 2021.
My first question, sir, is that 2021 was a good year. Do you think we have makings of 2022 becoming grand?
So, Nikunj, I think the ingredients are there. Omicron and wave 3 is something which is obviously disturbing the sentiment a bit. But the general sense is it will spread faster, but it will be milder. And if we can get out of this in the next month or two, then I think we are well set for a good year. The impact of all the investments that the government is making on infrastructure should start bearing fruit. And globally also the investments that multiple countries are making in the recovery should help us as well. So yes, there's no reason to expect that 2022 cannot be a great 2022.
Now, the two big factors, sir, which in a sense are going to be different for 2022, is that now there is a universal acceptance that we will have to deal with inflation, and that could be a problem area. But equally more important is that the supply chain disruptions which were there, they in a sense have only got multiplied.
There is certainly a concern on inflation. I think that's reflected in multiple central banks saying that they're thinking of either pulling back on the monetary policy or increasing interest rates. I think that concern is there because inflation hurts the lower sections of society much more than anybody else, and there is a concern on that. But having said that, part of the inflation that we saw in the last few months was because the recovery was sharper than most people expected. Supply chains were not ready for it. Logistics was not ready for it. So you saw container shortages, freight rates going up, etc. Some of that will correct. Even if you look at metal prices, it reached very high levels and now it's settling down to more sustainable levels. So I think some of the short-term impact of a rapid recovery reflected in inflation, which should tone down. But then there is the other part of it, which is more a consequence of money being spent in the economy translating into inflation. So I think one has to be careful in the response so that you don't overreact to it.
Do you think somewhere high energy cost could also dampen this entire animal spirit which you're talking about? Because we've seen a spike in coal, we've seen a spike in crude. Ultimately, India is an energy importer, and if energy prices they continue to spike up, it's going to just change the entire or shake the entire apple cart.
Yes, it could be. Oil is already crossed 80, that and also the rupee, because high oil costs and a weaker rupee certainly hurts the import bill. So the rupee is at 76 or in that space. So I think these are things that we should certainly watch out for. But also, as you saw in the last few weeks, the government had some headroom on the taxes, on the excise duties, etc. So you can also mitigate the impact on the common man by tweaking the taxes, because when the oil prices were low, we could get more through higher excise duties and taxes. So I think there is some headroom available there. But yes, globally, one would look at oil and gas prices. If you see gas prices in Europe, they really shot up. So I think these are some concerns. Energy prices certainly are a concern.
How do you see this current cycle being different from the previous capex cycle? And let's talk about big sectors where the capex has started: textiles, power, or even for that matter, metals.
Yeah, Nikunj, so the sense we got even at CII, at the National Council in early December when we spoke to the CEOs was that private sector capex is slowly coming back for multiple reasons. Private sector capex comes back when there is good demand, there is good profitability, there's high capacity utilization, and also better balance sheets. And I think all this has happened. The highly leveraged sectors have been able to deleverage. Demand has been strong, capacity utilization has been strong. And in India, fundamentally, we expect the demand even next year to be in the 8.5% range growth in GDP compared to 9.5% this year. So if you are moving at that range, private sector capex is headed back. Of course, there are sectors which will not see the capex that we had seen, 8-10 years back. Private sector capex was big in power, for instance, thermal power plants, etc. That's not going to come back that way. But metals is looking strong, chemicals is looking strong, and some of these sectors will see the capex come back. And I think we've already seen the capex reach pre-pandemic levels at the private sector.
How do you see again that point, sir, that this capex cycle in terms of the nature and the texture being different? The previous capex cycles were largely driven on the balance sheets of the company. They were driven by borrowing from bank. They were in a sense debt driven. Do you think this time around it could be different and these cycles could be technology driven?
Yeah, it will be different for a few reasons. One is the fact that the capital intensive industries have better balance sheets now than they had earlier. Okay, so that gives them more options, right? A lot of capital intensive industries in the metal space, for instance, will generate positive cash flows which can support capex growth without having to add to debt, right? So that itself is one positive difference from what it was earlier when you could only grow by adding more debt to your balance sheet. So the second part is corporates also have more options. You don't necessarily need to go to the banks. You can have bonds. You can, raise equity. So there are multiple options available as well. The third part is there is also growth coming, without that much of capex in terms of debt. For instance, if you look at the startups and if you look at those areas, the capex may be low, but the employment generation is much higher. And capex is also, or the money coming in is more through equity than through debt. So I think the nature of money coming into the economy is changing, and a lot of the capex of, let's say, metal sector is more through brownfield expansion than greenfield expansion. So that will also not require a lot of time and money spent on acquiring land, etc. It's about expanding and better utilizing existing land banks and assets that are already there. So these are a few things that we're seeing. So, but even when we talk to the government, we are also saying that as much as we encourage private capex and capex intensive growth, we also need to encourage sectors where the capex intensity may be low, but the employment intensity is higher. For instance, tourism is one such sector where employment intensity is much higher. Services in many areas, employment intensity is higher. Even in manufacturing, textile, leather, etc., areas where employment intensity is higher. So we need to find that balance because ultimately it's not just about capex, but also about jobs.
So we've got two things here. One, there is a serious talent crunch or skill shortage which is there, and on the other side you've got a lot of jobs which need to be created. Where do you see a balance in 2022?
So there are multiple aspects to it, right? One is we need to create more jobs, right? Because there's a huge part of the population or the working population engaged in agriculture and classified as self-employed, not because of choice, but because of lack of options, right? So we need to see how is it that we can create more jobs so that people who want to move out of agriculture-based jobs or from that self-employed category have options, right? So that is one. The second part is how do we improve the quality of jobs? And that's where the point that you made about skills, etc., comes in, because how do we, not only through education, but through skills, one is pay for higher value skills, and two is ensure that the requisite skills are available for people to constantly upgrade the quality of jobs that are available. So all these are challenges that the government and industry need to work together to solve. From an industry point of view, I think we should be willing to pay more for good quality skills as we are willing to pay for more for good quality education. And oftentimes that doesn't happen, and that's an area that we need to work on as industry.
So can I say this time CI has a very small budget wish list? Because normally the budget wish list from India Inc. always has been centered around three things: land reforms, labor reforms, low taxes, and also keeping the cost of capital low. So all the factors are at play already.
Yes, to some extent, many of our requests over the years have got addressed. But I think a few things that, as always, we will put forth to the government The list includes encouraging the government to continue to invest on infrastructure. That's very important to drive demand as well as drive competitiveness. It also talks about how do we make sure that household incomes which have been impacted by job losses, which have been impacted by pay cuts, etc., gets addressed. How do we protect the lower sections of society through the Manrega schemes and things like that till consumption comes back? Because while the investment sentiment is trending towards a positive, one thing we've seen in the last couple of quarters is the consumption sentiment is a bit fragile because household incomes have shrunk a bit and household expenditures have increased because of the pandemic. So that's an area that needs to get addressed. And household expenditure can also be addressed by more government expenditure on health, which is today at 1.3% of GDP. That needs to be pushed towards 3% or higher, as it is in most other countries of our level of economic maturity. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done there so that household expenditures are not, beyond budget, so to speak, and which defers consumption, and we want to ensure that consumption does not get derailed as much as investment comes back on track. So our wish list is around that, and a little bit more on the longer term on sustainability, on technology, providing the policy roadmap and the infrastructure roadmap, which can help us in these areas, and also a few suggestions around what can we do to encourage startups not only to be created here but to be listed here and to be registered here and grow in India. I think these are some of the areas that CI has been talking to the government about, and of course to continue to improve the cost and ease of doing business.
Also want to address something which we saw in the last cycle. We saw big corporate houses, Tatas, Birlas, even Reliance, all of them went abroad shopping. They wanted to acquire growth, and the fast way to do that was to acquire assets. Do you see this time the cycle would be more inward driven, more domestic driven?
So it will be sector specific. It will be dependent on the opportunities. If India is growing and there are enough opportunities to grow in India, invest capital in India, I think corporates in India would certainly prefer to do that. And I think as Tata Steel, we are doing that because it's a home market. It's a good market to be in. We have a lot of equity here. The profitability is good. So why wouldn't you grow as fast as you can, if not faster than the economy in India? So that's there. At that point in time, if you wanted to scale up, and if you wanted to scale up fast, you certainly needed to go overseas to build scale fast. Today the Indian market is large enough and growing fast enough to allow opportunities to scale up and build competitiveness, even if you're focused on the Indian market for most sectors. And I think so companies will take that call. So those opportunities are there in India, and hence you don't need to go outside India looking for opportunities because there are enough opportunities in India.
But in general, what can be done to ensure that the manufacturing wheel, which is now turning in favor of India after the PLI schemes, really accelerates further?
Yeah, to shift manufacturing to India, to grow manufacturing in India, you need to actually have a 10, 15, 20-year kind of approach, because manufacturing is capital investment which can't move so easily, right? So you need to make sure that people who invest capital see the potential and see some stability of opportunity for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Classic example is auto industry in India. 30 years back, India was not known as an automobile manufacturer, but policies were made, investments were made, and just about anybody who wanted to make automobiles came into India because you made in India for India. And they developed an auto component ecosystem, which is truly world-class. So today in India, you have world-class auto companies, world-class auto component companies who build scale in India, who've gone overseas, auto components at least, build scale overseas as well. So I think we need to have that kind of an approach. Pick sectors where India is a big market, pick sectors where India have some advantage in factor costs, have policies which encourage investments and support those investments so that over 10, 15 years, those companies can build scale, become world-class, and go out there and make in India for India and make in India for the world. So the PLI schemes are a good beginning. And I think we need to create many more ecosystems like we've created for the auto industry. Pharma industry is another example. I think steel industry is potentially a great example as well, because we have India is geologically very rich. It can be steel, it can be aluminum, it can be many other metals. So we need to pick the sectors, pick the geographies within India where they can flourish, support them with policy stability and incentives, and help them build scale and competitiveness.
We've seen the government focus on PLI. We've seen government's focus is there on making sure that EV is the next frontier in terms of adaptation and in terms of affordability. What could be the next one or two sectors where you think government now needs to prioritize their policy and needs to roll out incentives?
So I think two areas which already are in focus of the government. One is technology-led manufacturing. Electronics manufacturing is one, because pretty much anything and everything will have semiconductors. Again, these are all areas which cannot be created without support of the government. You've seen that globally. So I think there is a lot of support that we need to give, which we are giving as government. Industry will need to leverage that on technology-led growth. The other is prepare for the new, for a greener economy, because you have a climate economy out there over the next 20, 30 years. It could be hydrogen, it could be carbon capture and storage solutions, it could be renewable energy. Also, you need to create the infrastructure for that. It's not just about producing hydrogen, but making sure it reaches different parts of the country where it's required, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well. Because these are going to be the areas which are going to help countries differentiate themselves in the future.
And what's your understanding on the COVID front? Last question. We started with this one, but generally to understand that, do you think now India Inc. is prepared? We are going through a very powerful Omicron wave, but right now, touch wood, looks like there is no large-scale disruption. Do you think India Inc. is now prepared?
I think India Inc. has got better in dealing with it between wave 1 and wave 2 itself. Most companies, whether it's office-based companies or factory-based companies, have developed protocols. I dare say that many of our premises, whether it's at the office or in the factories, are safer than the communities outside, right? Because we have very strict protocols on who comes in, whether they are vaccinated, whether they're tested. We have protocols on distancing, social distancing, wearing masks, etc. So I think corporate India has really adapted to this new way of working and are able to handle the risk which comes with it. I think what we are looking forward to is less disruptions, across supply chains, disruptions which are thought through, because sometimes the disruptions are not really helping stop COVID, but are disrupting economic activity very significantly. And we've seen the impact that it has on livelihoods, and we need to make sure that we don't impact livelihoods unnecessarily. We need to certainly save all lives, but do it in a manner that has the least impact on livelihood. So I think corporate India is well equipped. I think better coordination between corporate India and the government at the center, the state, at the local level will help us see through this wave 3 without derailing the economic recovery.
Well, Mr. Narendran, really appreciate your time and really look forward to much more of you on ET Now going forward.
Thank you, Nikunj. My pleasure.